Hi, and welcome to part 2 of the Getting Started with MeshAgent series. I'm Tula Masterman. I'm an AI agent solution architect here at MeshAgent, and today I'm going to be walking you through how to build both a chat and a voice agent using MeshAgent. In the first video, we covered how to set up our account with MeshAgent, how to generate our API keys, as well as how to call our first chat and voice agent into a room without needing to write any of the code for the agents. In today's video, we're going to build both our chat and voice agent in 3 phases. First, we're going to build the agents without any tools. Next, we're going to add some of the built-in tools from MeshAgent to our agents. And then finally, we'll add a custom tool to the agent. One of the great things about working with MeshAgent is that any of the tools that you use, whether they're the built-in MeshAgent tools or custom tools, can be shared across any of the agents that you build. So even though the way that a chat agent and a voice agent are initialized might look a little bit different, they'll use tools in the same ways, and the same toolkits can be used across either of the agent types. So let's dive into building our first chat and voice agent that don't have any tools. So you can see here that I'm in my environment and I've already installed MeshAgent. If you haven't installed it yet, feel free to just run uv add MeshAgent all, and that'll install all of the libraries as well as the MeshAgent CLI. We'll be using the CLI throughout this tutorial and the other tutorials to do things like calling the agents into the room and making sure we have the right project activated. So now if I go ahead and open up VS Code, you'll see that I have my main py file here, and I have a few different imports just so that way I have everything from MeshAgent that I need, so that way we can start working with our chatbot and with our voice bot. You can see here that I'm using the MeshAgent service host, and what this does is this is going to allow us to connect to our room, and then we're going to have the agent running on a particular path. So you can see here that I have a chat path, and I also have a voice path for both my chatbot and my voice bot. The service host will also be important in the next video where we talk about how we're actually going to deploy these agents. Now, looking at the code here, you can see that there's really not that much code to actually create that simple chatbot. There's just a few lines where we're giving it mainly background information about the agent itself. And then for the sake of this demo, I've just added one rule so that way we can make sure that the agent is following the instructions we've given to it. The rules work the same way that a system prompt does. So this is where we'd want to include any information about the persona that the agent should act as, information regarding how it should use its tools, information about the tone, or things of that nature. So you can see here that I've just included one simple instruction for now that tells the agent to always respond to the user first, and then include a fun fact at the end of the response. Another important thing to call out here is that we have this LLM adapter, and this is using the OpenAI responses adapter. This means that our agent is going to be using the OpenAI responses API behind the scenes. If you're using a model from a different provider, you would just need to switch out the LLM adapter. That way you're able to use the API that model supports. Now, if we look at the simple voice bot here, you can see that it has the same name, title, description, and rules, and I've included the same instructions for having the agent provide a fun fact at the end of its response. And then I've also just added a couple other instructions to have it keep the response short and sweet and not to use emojis, since anytime you're having a voice conversation, those things tend to come out funny from the agent itself. Now, initializing this simple voice bot, the code here is just a little bit longer. We have some more information about actually creating the session. And here we've also included which model we want to use, as well as the voice that we want to use. If you wanted to use a different voice, all you have to do is swap out the voice in this line here. And then same thing for the model. If you wanted to use a different model, all you have to do is switch in and put in the model that you want to use. Now in our VoiceBot class, we've also added this create agent function. And within that function, we're also initializing some of the chat context for the voice agent. You don't have to include this, but I wanted to be sure this was here. So if you wanted to preload the VoiceBot with any additional context or information, you could always load that in. You can also add some of this context to the system prompt, but this is just another way to make sure that the voice agent has any of the applicable information it needs before the chat with the user begins. You can see here that I've just given it something simple to let it know what today's date is. And so this is all that it takes to set up both our chat and voice agent. And we'll be able to run both of these using the async.io run command. So now if I go ahead and flip back to my terminal, I'm just going to run our main Python file. Perfect, so I can see that now this is running on port 777, which is the same port that I had passed up above for the MeshAgent port that I want this to run on for this example. And now if I just flip to another tab in my terminal, all I need to do is run the MeshAgent call command, and then I'm going to pass it the same URL for where I want to run the agent, and then I need to make sure that this actually is using the same service path that we had before. So if I flip back here, you can see that I have our chat agent is at the chat path and the voice agent is at the voice path. So I just need to just switch this to chat, and then I'm going to run this in the getting started room, and I'm going to name this chat agent. And when I run this line, it's actually going to call the agent that we have into our room. So if I go to MeshAgent, you'll see that the getting started room has been activated. And if I go in here, we'll see that the agent has actually joined the room. And then if I go into the room, we can see our chat agent has come up. So to test the agent, I'm just going to ask it, let's see, I'll just ask it how it is today. And this will respond, and it should also give me a fun fact. Oh, see, there we go. Oh, I did not know that octopuses had 3 hearts, so it is kind of fun sometimes using the fun fact just as a way to test the agent and make sure that it is in fact listening to the system rules. And if I go back to my terminal, I can run the exact same command, but instead of calling the chat agent into the room, I'm just going to call the voice agent into the same room. And then I'm going to name it the voice agent. And then I'll go back to the MeshAgent Studio. Oh, and there we go. We can see that our voice agent just popped up. So now all I need to do is click on the start voice session, and I'll be able to say something to the agent and it'll respond back to me. One thing to note before I do that though is it is helpful to hit mute after you're done speaking, so that way the agent doesn't pick up on any background noise, or if you're in a room with multiple people, it doesn't start to listen to them and interrupt its original response to you. Hey agent, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. How can I help you today? Fun fact, honey never spoils. Archaeologists have found 3,000-year-old honey that's still good to eat.
There we go. So we can see that our voice agent's working, and it even gave us a fun fact about honey, something that I certainly did not know. So now that we have both our simple chat and voice agent without tools working, let's go ahead and go back to our code, and we're just going to add a couple toolkits to both of the agents that use some of the built-in MeshAgent tools. At MeshAgent, we wanted to make sure that we've developed a variety of different tools and toolkits for common tasks like searching the internet, uploading documents, and converting something like a PDF file to Markdown, as well as being able to write documents to the room. And so you'll see here that I've added a couple of toolkits to our agent. The way to think about toolkits is just grouping a couple of different tools. So something like this document authoring toolkit is going to comprise a few different tools that actually help the agent to write documents. So something like opening a document or closing a document might be 2 different tools that both exist within the same document authoring toolkit. We also have these mark it down tools. So you can say I have them mark it down from user, and this means that the agent's able to ask the user for a document, the user can provide the document, and then the agent can call the tool to convert the provided document to Markdown. Similarly, we have the mark it down from file. So if the user uploads a document to the room, the agent can call a tool to actually convert that document that's in the room to Markdown. One of the other toolkits that we have is this UI toolkit. And what's helpful with this is, let's say that you're conversing with the agent and the agent realizes it needs to ask a follow-up question to gather additional information to complete your request. By having this UI toolkit, it's able to throw up something on the screen, and it can fill in a form and say, oh, I need additional information, or can you provide me the link to the document, or what would you like to name the document that I'm working on? Things like that, so that way it's able to get intermediate information from the user as it's working on completing the task. Another thing to call out here is that we've also updated the rules. So we still have our first rule that tells the agent to include a fun fact at the end of the response, and then we've also added some additional rules that just provide additional information about how the agent should actually use its tools. So now if I just scroll down to the voice agent, you'll see that we have all of the same toolkits. And like I mentioned before, this is one of the great things about working with MeshAgent tools is that you only have to define the tools once, and then they can be used across either agent type, whether that's a chat agent or a voice agent. And then same thing here, we've also updated the voice agent system rules so that way it has a better understanding understanding of how it should use the tools that we've given to it. So to run these agents, I'm just going to go back to my terminal here. And then I'm going to run our Python file again, since I've made some changes with the tools. Now that's running. And then I'm just going to run the exact same commands to call the agents into the room. So I'm going to call in the voice agent. And then I'm also going to, call in the chat agent. Perfect. So both of those ran. And then if I go back to the MeshAgent Studio, we'll see that my getting started room is active again. And if I go to the room, we have both our voice agent and our chat agent that are now here. So to test this out, I'm first going to start with the voice agent, and I'm just going to tell it to write a document to the room about honey, since earlier on it had given us a fun fact about honey. Hey agent, can you please write a document about the origins of honey? I don't really understand where it came from and how it's evolved. So we can see here that the agent wants to know what it should call the document. And this is just an example of how the agent's able to use the UI toolkit, so that way it can get information from the user during intermediate steps. In a case like this, it might make sense to actually add a new system rule to the agent to tell it to always ask the user for what it should name the document, just so we can be sure that it's naming things appropriately and the user's able to find them easily. And then we'll see in a second here that that document's going to get posted to the room. Oh, so here we go. So I have our origins of honey document, and I can read through this.
About the origins and evolution of honey, covering how it's made by bees, its ancient history, and its importance over time. Would you like any changes or more details added to the document before we finalize it? Fun fact, did you know that honey never spoils? Archaeologists have found pots of honey in ancient Egyptian tombs that are over 3,000 years old and still perfectly edible.
So here we go. We have our document, and then the voice agent also responded to us, letting us know that the document's been posted, and it also gave us the fun fact that we had requested. Now I could keep talking to the voice agent and then ask it to use its other tools, but for the sake of the demonstration, I'm going to switch to the chat agent. Okay, so now I've switched to the chat agent, and then I just told it to tell me some fun facts about honey, and you can see here it is actually giving me a new dialog box asking if there's additional changes that I want it to make. So I'm just going to go ahead and accept this and say no. And if we look at the document, we can see that the chat agent was actually able to update the document the voice agent had started working on, and now it's added some additional fun facts about honey. So now I'm going to upload a file to the room. I'm just going to pick a research paper that my team and I had written a little bit earlier in the year. And then this is going to get added to the contents of the room, and then I should be able to talk to the chat agent and ask it to help me understand the research paper. And so behind the scenes, the agent is going to start to process this research paper PDF, so we can see that it's reading and summarizing the contents, and periodically notifications like that will show up in the room. Perfect. And then I can click in here and I can see that it's working on this summary and analysis of the research paper. And then suddenly all of the information about the paper comes back here. So this is great. Just from glancing at this, I can tell that it's correct, given that my team and I had written the paper. I wanted to make sure this was something that was pretty easy to test. And you can just see it pretty thoroughly covers some of the main points. And then you can see here that the chat agent is also just letting me know that it's created this analysis. And if I double click into this research paper, you can verify that this is in fact about LEC, or layer enhanced classification, which was a technique that we found for improving the overall safety of AI-based systems. And so for the last part of this tutorial, we're going to add a custom tool to our agent. So I'll just go back to VS Code. And for the last tool that we're going to add, we're just going to create a simple task tracking tool. And this allows us to take advantage of the in-room database storage that we have with MeshAgent. And so you can see here that I've added a room setup py file. And this is helpful if there's certain operations that you want to run before the agent is connected to the room. We can do things like adding a different database, and this will allow us to, in this case, have our task tracker. So you can see here that it really just takes a couple lines of code to connect to the room using the room client. And then once we're we're connected to the room, we're going to try to create a database called tasks. And this is just going to simply take in the task ID and the task description. So you could create a file that's similar to this one if there's certain types of tables that you want to add to the room in advance, or maybe there's other documents or things in your setup that you want to make sure exist in the room before the agent connects to it. Now, if we go back to the main Py file, you'll see that we've just added two different classes for writing tasks and getting tasks. And this is going to allow us to update the task table that we created in the setup file. If you take a look at the input schema, this should be pretty familiar for anybody who's worked with OpenAI function calling before, since we're following the same format. So in the write task class, you'll notice that we just add the name, title, and description for the tool. And then we also fill out all the information in the input schema here. You can see it's pretty simple for now. We really are just requiring that we add a task description, so that way we have some way to document which tasks have been added to our task list. So within each tool definition, we'll need two functions. First, we'll need this initialization function, and then we'll also need an execute function, so that way we know what action should be performed when the tool is called. So in this case, you can see for the write task, we're just simply inserting a new record into the database. And then similarly for the get tasks, we're going to be returning information from the tasks table in our database. So now that we've defined both the tools for interacting with our tasks table, all we need to do is update our chat agent and our voice agent. If I scroll down here, you'll see that in this toolkit section, I can add a new toolkit. I'm just going to call this task tools. And then within the toolkit, I'm going to add both the write task and get task tools. And then it will be the same thing in the voice agent. You can see we've added the exact same toolkit. So now we'll go back to the terminal, and then we'll go ahead and run our agents. But first, I just need to be sure to run the setup file, so that way that table can get populated in the room before we call in our agents. So you can see here, we've connected to the room and the tasks table has been created, and we're doing all of this inside of the same getting started room. Now I'll run the main file, and then I'll go ahead and call both of our agents into the room again. Perfect. So if I go back to the studio, you'll see that now the databases have been added, and now I have the task table inside of the database part of the room. So now I'll just tell the chat agent to add a new task. I'll say, add a new task for me to upload the training video to YouTube. And this will go ahead and update our database. So we can see here that it's updated the task list, and I can actually verify this by going to the voice agent, and then I'll just ask the voice agent what tasks we've added so far. Can you refresh my memory of what's on my to-do list? I can't remember what tasks I've added. Oh, perfect. It actually decided to use the UI toolkit to show me the tasks that are currently on my to-do list.
Your current to-do list has one task: upload the training video to YouTube. Would you like to add, remove, or modify any tasks before I close the document? Fun fact: the first to-do list is believed to have been created by Benjamin Franklin.
Perfect. So we got the information about what's on my to-do list. It also ended up writing a document to the room in this case, and it continued to give us the fun fact. So now we're able to verify that the agent's able to use the new custom tools that we added to it. That brings us to the end of this training video. In this session, we covered how to build a simple chat and voice agent with no tools. We also added built-in MeshAgent tools to both of our agents, as well as a custom tool to each of our agents. Join us in the next video, where we'll be diving into how to deploy and share your agent. Thanks for watching.